Okay, everybody, welcome to the program. This is the Otherppl Show. My name is Brad Listi, and this is my podcast. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Hope you're doing okay out there, wherever you happen to be. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Instagram and Bluesky. It is Sunday, and as such, it is time for a new character studies episode. I think most of you know about this new series that I'm doing on Sundays on this program. It is called Character Studies, and if you don't know about it, it essentially features me in conversation with ordinary human beings. These are interviews with civilians. So the guests in these Character Studies episodes are not authors or literary people. They are appearing on this program just to talk about who they are. And crucially, they are doing so anonymously, by first name or by pseudonym. So this is not about recognition or self-promotion of any kind. It is simply about conversation and trying to forge some kind of human connection. Having said that, if you are listening to this show, and if you like character studies episodes, and if you happen to know anybody who would be a great guest for the series, you can email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com. And I have such a great character study conversation to share with you today. I'm very excited about it. It is coming up momentarily. Before we get there, I do have quick orders of business to tend to. First of all, if you could please sign up for my newsletter, I would be obliged. You can do that at bradlisti.substack.com. The newsletter goes out once a week, and I will share with you the latest episodes of this show. I'll let you know what's going on with the podcast. I also share a list of links to things that I've been reading and finding interesting. So if that sounds good, head on over to Substack and sign up for my newsletter. And I also want to remind you or let you know about my new company. It is called Deep Dive, and it is in the works. It is launching later this year, and Deep Dive specializes in the creation of long-form educational audio. So ultra long-form audio courses, and the debut course from Deep Dive is called How to Write a Novel. I am the host, and the course features more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with dozens of today's leading writers. So people like Emily St. John Mandel, Melissa Broder, Steve Almond, Matt Bell, Vivi Ganeshananthan, Ingrid Rojas Contreras, Hannah Pittard, Lynn Steger-Strong. The list goes on. It's going to be really cool. It's coming together as we speak, and it will be available later this year. I will keep you up to speed here on this podcast. And in the meantime, you can check out Deep Dive on the internet at www.deepdive.audio, and you can follow Deep Dive on Bluesky and Instagram. All right, so it is now time for the main event, this week's character study conversation. My guest is named Michael, and he is a 54-year-old housing entrepreneur from Berkeley, California. I had such a good time meeting Michael and talking with him about his life. He is a very fascinating and very intelligent human being who has lived a life of high accomplishment and high adventure, and has done a lot of service work, and has also done a lot of really deep personal work in an effort to bring himself to terms with some of the more challenging aspects of his existence. So just incredibly fascinating talking with Michael, and I'm very pleased to be able to share the conversation with you right now. So let's get to it. It is now time for the third character study in the history of this program.
Hello, I'm Michael. I'm 54 and I'm a housing entrepreneur. I live and work in Berkeley, California.
Are you from Berkeley?
No, if you mean by from, was I born here or grew up here? No.
Where are you from?
I grew up in many different places. I was born on an Army base in Maryland, just outside DC. and my family moved 8 times growing up. So even though I started on the East Coast, we ended up living on the West Coast in many different places.
And
Um,
your dad was in the Army?
Initially, yeah, and then he was climbing the corporate ladder and taking us along for the ride. Yeah.
Was it a good ride?
As a kid, you don't really know anything different, right? So the advantage of it was we got introduced to all these different cultures and experiences. The disadvantage is we didn't ever put down deep roots in any one area. So I see it both ways. Yeah.
Did it make you like I guess there's benefits to that. I think I moved around a little bit too, and
Mm.
I will sometimes tell myself that it made me more adaptable, like socially. Like maybe part of the reason why I can talk to people
Yeah.
like this is the fact that I was in environments where I didn't know anybody and I just had to start
Yeah.
talking.
100%. There's just no question. like I am an extremely adaptable person, and I'm never uncomfortable meeting new people. Never. And in fact, after all of our moves, I went back east for college. So I fled I fled the West Coast, went to New England for undergrad, and then I left the country for 2.5 years and lived in West Africa in a tiny village in the bush for Peace Corps. So I went as I went as far out there as you can go, and so I feel even though there was a lot of change and at times the change is hard, I feel like it's made me a far more complex and adaptable and interesting person. So
What kind of kid were you?
I was a I would say sensitive, creative, and ambitious kid.
Ambitious how? Like just in school, you wanted to
Yeah,
do
I
well?
loved school, and I found uh, school was one of my happy places. I love having a goal that's well defined, and I really adored my teachers. Almost every one of them, I can literally almost remember every teacher, at least through obviously middle school, and um, and yeah, school was great. So
Jeez, you're
yeah.
so well adjusted. What we gotta find
Oh
something
no,
here
I
that
got
went
plenty of
wrong.
shadow, man. I got plenty of. Don't worry, don't worry. But I did actually like. I think I have this achievement side that, like anything, was a defense to other things, but at least a productive defense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at least you're
Yeah,
channeling it in a
yeah. I
good way.
wasn't
But
doing drugs. I was I was overachieving.
so when you say you loved school, like was there stability for like a stretch of time? Like did you do high school all in one place
I
or were you
did.
moving?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have that. Yeah, and I wanted to add something to that. When I got a little older and I hit, of course, the beautiful age of puberty, which is the hardest time, right? I, we landed. My family left. We had actually. I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll take you through it helps you understand, like, because we moved a lot. We started in this Fort Meade Army base. I was born on an Army base. My dad was a captain in the Army. We left. We went to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where my dad was finishing graduate school. We then moved to Bellevue, Washington, which is a major suburb city right outside Seattle, if you're familiar with the Seattle area. But this is all PMS, pre Microsoft. So Seattle was a much more sleepy place, and Bellevue was nothing like it is today. It was like a commuter suburb of Seattle. We were there for a brief while, and then my we decided to buy a house further deeper into the suburbs. So we bought a house in Redmond, which of course is the headquarters of Microsoft. Microsoft didn't even exist when we moved there, and then only 1 year into that Redmond, Washington stay, my dad was asked to open an office in Southern California for his engineering firm. My dad was a civil engineer, and so my parents picked up the family. We moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. So I went from this very rainy, very sweet, very protected little suburb of Seattle to the hot, blazing sun of Vegas, but actually had an amazing experience there. My family, my dad's as I call it, a raging atheist, and my mother is a very kind Lutheran. But we landed in an all Mormon neighborhood because you may not know this, but Vegas was primarily owned and settled by the Mormons before it became the city of sin. And everyone on our block was Mormon. I kid you not. As a little kid, it was like awesome because Mormons are friendly and super family positive. And so for me, I was like, this is the coolest. I had all these immediate friends, and there were trampolines in every backyard. And but then the coolest part was we went to a school that was being bused. This is the late 70s. So my school was half black. Like I went from like lily white suburbs of Washington to a half black elementary school where my best friend was black and my principal was black. And I'm this little dude who I don't even know what race is, you know? And it was awesome. Like, so I have these photos, which are like hilarious, of me, this pudgy little white guy with this, with these like, with all these black students around me who have afros, and I'm just, I don't recognize a single thing, you know. I'm just like having fun. And I remember my friends' sisters doing like double dutch jump rope and listening to disco. I mean, it was like totally this crazy. But remember, this is my elementary school. It's like this multicultural mixing pot. And then on the weekends, I'm going to the Mormon church with our neighbors, which is super trippy and like hyper white, you know. So it was just this fascinating 2 years. And then we moved back to Redmond. So we lifted off from this desert, you know, this bizarre desert experience, back to the rainy Pacific Northwest. And then I finished most of my elementary school in that lovely, which I loved, in this like very comfortable, sweet town where my sister, I have an older brother, younger sister, we would walk to school, you know, through shortcuts through the forest. This is all pre-helicopter parent, you know. This is like the early 80s. Like it was awesome. Like Stranger Things. I mean, literally that was my life, you know.
That was my life too.
I'm so glad to hear that, man, because I played D&D. I had a banana seat bike, and I was a geek,
Yeah.
you know, and I didn't know it, which was even better.
Right. Right.
I was a slightly pudgy, sensitive, creative geek, you know, and that whole series I just like identify with like intensely. But D&D, my friends and I played D&D, and we were into Atari, and you know, like, um, but yeah, we were there, and then this is where things got a little hard. And it's a very long story, but my dad took another one of these promotions and wanted to move early down to Southern California. Interestingly enough, to a town called Redlands, not Redmond, but Redlands, which is in what they call the Inland Empire, out by San Bernardino, if you know that area at all.
Sure.
Okay. And for a variety of reasons, probably my parents' marriage, which was not going great. My mother was scared to let my dad go down there without us. So about 2/3 of the year into sixth grade, my mother and my parents picked us all up and parachuted us in to SoCal. So we weren't even done with in my case, sixth grade, my brother's case, eighth grade, in my sister's case, third grade. So we parachuted into this completely different landscape. Again, radically different. Like I dropped into an elementary school that was really nowhere near as it was not a great place for a little geek like me. I had my first experience of bullying. I was like a fish out of water. I didn't swear. I didn't know swear words. You know, I got picked on by these little proto gangs. It was a heavily Latino school. This community is pretty cool, but it had a lot of low income, more rough areas, and I was like the sitting duck. You know, so
They're like, let's get
so for
let's
me,
get the new kid.
oh man, it was brutal. And you know, it's the combination, as I'm sure you know, of when you hit puberty, you become self-aware, self-conscious, right? That's already difficult. But then when you're dropping into an entirely new environment where you don't know anybody, and I was never really good at least I thought I wasn't very good at sports. So for me, the end of sixth grade and seventh grade were just like like a bad 1980s movie, you know, a lot of insecurity and bullying and real trouble. And so that was Southern California. We stayed there. By the time I got to eighth grade, I'd gotten very wise, very savvy. I was very, and you could argue I was a little traumatized. I decided I never again. Like I can never be on the outside. Like I have to get wise fast. And I did not feel like I had anyone on my side. And so I became extremely resourceful, but also extremely protected.
So like, wait, it's like socially resourceful?
Yeah, like I'm gonna figure out what the cool kids do, and I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna become a cool kid, and I will never be tormented, teased, bullied like this again. So I had this huge pivot. And when you're little, you don't know what you're doing, but I was clearly I did not have support at home, and I did not feel like I had support at school. So for me in my world, it was I'm on my own. That was the message, and I better manage well. So
So wait, your
so
parents didn't know about this, or they didn't
they
care
were they were incapable of helping at that time.
because their marriage was
Their marriage was in the tank and it was not going well, and things were really rough at home with that. And then the school environment was felt harsh, and seventh and eighth grade is just not easy for any kid,
That's right.
really, generally,
Yeah.
generally,
Yeah, those
right?
were rough years for me too. So you at that age, like you're speaking with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, but at that age, did you know that the marriage was not going well? Like, was it evident to you then, or is it only something that you could see with now looking back?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? You probably, I don't know what your family history is, but when you're a kid, you really want to believe your parents are okay.
Right.
They're your lifeline, right? So it's a very challenging psychologically to question their righteousness or their or the it's terrifying to think, wow, they're a mess. This is not working. This is dangerous. This is not. And so it's a great question. I think, of course, on a subconscious level, I was getting all kinds of signals, but also, as a fish, like a fish in water, you don't know what it's like to be outside that fish tank. And so I think children in particular adapt and they adjust, and they want to accept the water they're in, partly because they can't jump the tank,
I think that
right?
makes a
So
lot of sense. You want, it's really, really hard for a kid to accept the idea that his parents like don't have it together or like I'm not saying this is the case with your
yeah,
parents, but like some parents like they're not emotionally available or they're even emotionally abusive to kids or physically abusive to kids. Like any kind of like rupture in that link is very difficult for a child to process.
100%. And I can share this, and I think it's okay because I'm semi-anonymous, but my mother is an incredibly loving, good person, but she was overwhelmed and dealing with my father, who was a very psychologically and emotionally abusive person. So I grew up in that. And as you probably know, what little boys tend to do is they want to protect their mother. And so what they do is they put away their own needs, and they make their priority making sure mom's okay. Right?
Sure.
And so that dynamic was alive and well. And the good news, the dividend, and where I am now, years later, with lots of good West Coast therapy and all kinds of self exploration and all kinds of journeys and things, is recognition, of course, like which hopefully we all get, that our parents are humans and flawed, and that my mother was doing her best in a really crappy situation, and my father was coming from a family that was far, far worse off. And as we inherit the unfinished work of our parents. that is our that's the way I view it, by the way, at least. I view it that way, spiritually and psychologically.
Yeah. No, I think that's true.
And so what do? You try to understand it as best you can, and you want to take that raw material and you want to make something of it. And the way you do that, of course, is you have to feel it. But then eventually you get a little bit of distance. But anyway, I wanted just to say, so we had this really rough, those years were brutal. And
The Redlands years.
the Redlands years. And I look back and I have nothing but empathy for that little awkward proto teenager. I and I understand his tactics for survival. And but what's interesting is I got really, I don't know if you have read or seen The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a phenomenal book, and the movie as well, which is I think the second remake was like
What, the
it's
Anthony Minghella?
I guess it was the one that was made more recently, and was it the 90s or
Yeah, with Jude Law and Matt Damon and
yeah,
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah,
Like
beautiful movie, like, so beautiful to look at.
beautiful and just brilliantly acted and everything. And the book is amazing too, the Patricia Highsmith book. But I thought the movie's even better, to be honest. And anyway, why I'm bringing that up in relation to this is there was a part of me that had a little bit of that Talented Mr. Ripley. Like his character is just this. If you pay attention, is this seductive master manipulator. And by manipulation, I don't mean that pejoratively. Like he clearly feels that he needs to be these other things to be accepted or to survive. In this case, that that novel takes it to an extreme, right? He's become sort of psychopathic. But we all have a little Mr. Ripley in us when we want to fit in.
Well
And
well, yeah, and
and I got
you mentioned that
yeah.
you're in Redlands and you're getting picked on, and you sort of had this moment of truth where you're like, "This is not gonna happen again. I'm gonna find a way to integrate myself with the cool kids and do what they do." What did the cool kids do in Redlands?
Well, I was lucky. I got to implement my strategy not in Redlands per se, but in when we moved again. Here's the pivot to back to the Bay Area. Well, I should say to the Bay Area for the first time. My dad landed the final promotion because the world headquarters for his engineering firm was in San Francisco, and we moved to San Mateo, which is an affluent suburb on the peninsula. Um, and I landed there the summer before ninth grade. So I had this sort of period, and that was when I took all of those lessons, if you want to call them that, that strategy, maybe was a better word. And I thought, okay, when I started at this high school, I'm really gonna be careful, make sure that I don't, you know, do anything that would jeopardize my status or my and so I landed luckily in a pretty decent public school where actually cool kids got good grades too. So I don't think I could ever have not done well grade wise because I care actually about learning, but it was particularly convenient and it was funny. And so I got in with a group of guys that we were like the preppy cool kids. We were the new we were ninth graders, but we were sort of uh, we had like connections to this group of affluent kids that um, wanted to do well in school, but also had a distinct kind of style, and it's just interesting. And our high school had, of course, sports teams and all that, but oddly enough, at my high school, the jocks did not rule the school. They were kind of second tier,
Who
and
ruled? The preppy
you
smart
know,
kids?
the preppy smart kids. It was like an early version of the elites that the MAGA despise. It was this sort of like it was kind of like, oh yeah, we're cool, we're stylish, we listen to the right music, and sure, some of us play sports too. And so it was really interesting. But I share that because I landed safely. But I remember being so hyper self conscious, and this is where I say that Mr. Ripley side, like so meticulous about uh, because we had particular style, right? We're dressing. This was like pegged pants, and so it was that late '80s kind of. But everything was meticulous. Like we listened to we were into indie rock bands, and we would like go to Tower Records and go find the coolest indie rock bands. And I look back at it, and I kind of marvel in a way at our sophistication as ninth graders. But we were lucky because we were in the Bay Area, so there was actually a fair amount of there was actually a lot of kind of cool subculture going on.
Sure.
But I do want to say one other thing though, because of my prior experiences and who I am, and I mentioned I'm a sensitive boy, and there's still some sensitive boy in me. I was never cruel to the uncool kids, never, ever, ever. And I think I was a bridge a bit. I think I ended up having this kind of bridge thing where I was traveling with the cool kids, but I didn't exclude people.
Well, you knew what it meant to be an outsider at that point.
full on. And I had tremendous empathy.
Where did that come from? Your mom, you think?
Probably, yeah, probably. I think my ambition and some of my tendency to dive deep, which is I would never change for the world, actually comes from my dad. But I think my sensitivity and my compassion come from my mother.
And you mentioned that your dad could be kind of a rough character, like, emotionally and,
Yeah,
like, how did that like, at some point, was there a breaking point? Like, how did it manifest in the relationship that you had with him?
yeah.
Like, you obviously were trying to protect your mom?
Effectively, yeah. It manifested it as their relationship got worse and worse. And as I grew more into young adulthood, the internal tensions, the things that I couldn't overlook certain things anymore, right? There were more and more moments where I was like, this isn't right, you know. But even then, it's amazing the level of defense I had, right? There's a moment which I'll never forget for the rest of my life when my dad is a troubled soul. He's never done his work. He's never done he's never done his healing work. He's never done it, and never seen a therapist once. I think he's only gotten like a handful of massages in his life. Like I want to like buy him a massage and be like, Jesus Christ, he's a victim of his own era, but also of his own shortcomings, and he came far from the family he came from. But anyway, I bring all this up because it got worse, and the verbal abuse and the which no one was spared. No one was spared, and as you differentiate as an adult, you start to go, wait a second, I'm not my parents. I'm my own person. But it took me, yeah, it took me going to college, which was like liberation for me. By the way, I had to fight tooth and nail to go to the college I wanted to. My dad, after pounding at home that I should be straight A's and never get a B, and saying you can be, on the one hand, he would say you can be whatever you want to be, but you also need to achieve, achieve, achieve. So then I was National Merit Scholar. I got like phenomenal SAT. I had almost a 1600 on the SAT. I mean, I had like the crazy academic success story. I could get in anywhere. The Ivies, I got into Williams College, which is an extremely selective and magical place in New England. And that's where I wanted to go. And my dad was getting cheap on me suddenly. I think you should go to a state school. And by the way, my dad had the resources at this point to pay. And so the first time it happened is I literally got into a fist fight with my dad
Over
over
wanting to go to
over
school?
over him backing out of his commitment to letting me go to the school I want to go to.
How did that go?
And okay, because because I actually stood up for myself, and the physical alteration, to be honestly, is nothing. It was the emotional, mental part that was the most important. Was that I was saying, no, you don't get to change the rules on me.
Was that the first time you'd ever stood up to him like that?
Truly, probably the first time.
And how did he respond?
Not well. Um, but when he lost control and punched me, I think he suddenly realized that he had crossed a line. There were no apologies. There were no apologies.
He doesn't sound like the apologizing sort.
He's not capable of that. Uh,
What
but I
is by the
think
way, what is that? Because I know a couple people like that who, like, they just don't apologize. Why?
I think I think there's a certain personality type that is so defended.
Yeah.
I think they are so armored. The word I use is armored. They're armored. They're carrying around, like I always think of it. I've done a lot of work with plant medicine and psychedelics, and I've gotten so much wisdom from it. And you can sometimes see on people, like literally, like psychic armor. And the bigger the defenses, the more it weighs them down, and the more distorted they are. They're like inside of the armor. They're just this wounded creature. So my sense is people like that, they're incapable of acknowledging a mistake or to truly apologize because they view it as vulnerability, and they view vulnerability as weakness.
Or there's people I think who view vulnerability with just terror. They have like an inherent fear.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Because it means underneath the armor, I think they mistake it. I think they somehow think that they have such heavy armor that to be vulnerable means to take some of that off, and it's just impossible. So an apology feels like a surrender.
Sure.
This is my sense of it, you know.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Yeah, that makes it
Um,
that squares with my experience. And did you get to go to Williams College?
I did, and it was like heaven.
Why?
My freshman year, honestly, I always, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like over a good life, there are occasional peak years, like years that stand out, and you're like, oh my God, what an incredible year that was. And then there are years that might be really some of the hardest. And that's what happens, right, over a life. And like my freshman year at Williams College was like indisputably one of the best years of my life. It's like, I literally felt like I'd found my place, I was overjoyed. I
What? Wait,
I
wait. And
I
Williams
I
College is. I think I was confusing it in my head with Hampton. Hampton's the one that's like super hippie.
Hampton's the super hippie, and that's in Northampton.
Okay.
And Williams is in the deep west of Massachusetts, in the very far northwest corner of Williamstown. And it's the sort of rival of Amherst College, which you may have Amherst is in Northampton in middle Massachusetts.
Sure. Okay.
And Williams is this like magical vestige of true classic liberal arts college. Like, with you study the canon, I think now, some of the woke junk has degraded it, but it's still very strong. It's like a classic, well-rounded. You go there, you study everything. You don't just go into your narrow little, specialty. You study art history, you study English literature, you study philosophy, you study science, and it's a very athletic school. And I discovered crew, and unbeknownst to me, I was really good at it. So I also had this. I suddenly became like the best freshman on the crew team. This was like a total revelation for me.
How tall are
So
you?
I heard,
Are you like a big? Are you
pardon?
a big guy? I can't see. Like how tall are you?
I'm a strong guy. I'm only 5'11", so I'm short. Which is ironically, I'm very short for crew. Like,
Yeah.
and so when I made the first boat, when I made the varsity boat my sophomore year, which was unprecedented, I sat in the bow. Right, so that's where the small guys are either on the stroke or the bow. They're at the very, but for me it was like this door opened. It was like Narnia. It was like New England Narnia. Uh, this town, if you've ever been there, is stunning. It's like, imagine, if you will, like the perfect New England town, like rolling. It's nestled, and they call it the Purple Valley. I'm not even kidding. It has the Hoosick River, a wild river going through it. There's old farms. It's just brick, ivy covered brick buildings, wonderful old traditions. It was this perfect mix of very traditional, but also very open minded. And it has like extraordinary academics. And then it has this robust, classic athletic commitment. So the idea that you're building a body and a mind,
Yeah. You're getting like a
it's
real education, like a
the
real.
true thing.
Yeah.
Like I wish we had more of. I recognize that it's somewhat elite, and not everyone can afford it, etc. Although Williams, by the way, side note, now has fully needs blind grants, 100%. But even when I was there was a lot of diversity, but these were high achievers. But for me, it was like I couldn't believe it. I felt like I scored, like I won the lottery, and I couldn't. It was like a smorgasbord. Like I was like every class, I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool, and like was taking poetry, and then I was like, taking geology, and rowing crew, and like, can you imagine for a West Coast kid, like rowing crew on a beautiful lake with like the fall colors in New England?
Right.
Man, it's like honestly, it's a little cheesy, but it was a little bit like Goodwill Hunting. Like it had that. I'm not even kidding, and like to the point where, because this is at the end of an era. This is before the federal government got a lot more hung up on alcohol and stuff. But the college, this is insane. The college had budgets, entertainment, like social budgets. They abolished fraternities and sororities a long time ago, but they had social houses that anyone could enter into, by the way, which is really cool. So once you got out of your freshman year, you could you could go into one of these houses, and there were clusters of houses, and they had old dining halls, like old school, like we meals were served, dining, like kind of like Oxford. And then they had party budgets, so they would like this college would fund kegs, and sometimes, I kid you not,
Wow.
open bars, like, and dude, get this, on Fridays, certain Fridays were formal Fridays. And you would go to these parties, but you had to wear khakis, a white button up shirt, a blazer, and a rep tie. Like, for real. Like, and this is in the late 80s, early 90s. Like, that was happening, right?
Wow.
I know. And it was like, what? And now that's not there anymore. But I think, wow, like, I got so lucky. I got to like have this rarefied. It was kind of I think, sadly, probably nothing that will ever there won't be something like that again. It's probably over. But remarkable, So for me, coming out of high school, which I did fine in, but I never felt at home in. For me, I college was like the
You
Renaissance or
found
something.
your place, and I imagine you must have found your people if you had that good of a time.
I have dear friends who I'm still close to this day, and they're all like models of classic liberal arts education, like decent, good people who are doing good things in the world, who stay informed, who are relatively intellectual without being, pretentious, like well-read people. I see these friends mainly on the East Coast, and I love them. And they're different than me, by the way. A lot of them did the more traditional, go to New York. One of them is general counsel at a huge company. One is an entrepreneur. Another's a heart surgeon. But I wanted to say, I'm doing a shout out. This is the good establishment, right? These are people who are good and conscientious people who give back, and it's all, I trace it to that education.
What about
You know,
like romantic relationships? You dating in college?
I was in a lot of my life. I've had a lot of experience, but I'm not usually the guy who sticks with a partner long term, and that's been something I've been working on in my life. But I had a bunch of great girlfriends there. I had one particular special one my junior year, and I regretfully blew it. And I couldn't win her back. I hurt her feelings. She was 1 year above me, but like an amazing woman, a writer, by the way, and fascinating. She was a Upper East Side, Upper West Side Jew. So like the classic, what you imagine if you're going to write a story of a New York Jewish family. Like, honestly, when I met her parents and saw her apartment, I was like, oh my! It was like out of a
It's
novel.
like out of
Like,
like a Woody Allen movie or something.
dude, like super intellectual, thoughtful people.
Right.
They lived on the very at the time, because New York is nothing like it is now. It was still the Upper West Side, the Upper West Side. As you get towards the end of the park, close Harlem, was not so nice. And her parents had this like fantastic terrace apartment, like overlooking the park,
Yeah.
and like it was full of books. And I was a fool to like let this beautiful woman. Her name was Valerie. She was such a cool woman, and but anyway, it was still worth it. We had a great dating life. My junior year, she was my most serious girlfriend. My freshman year, I dated another woman from Tennessee who was pretty fun. But
But
other
wait,
than those
you
two,
said you blew it with you hurt her feelings, you said? Like what did you do to can you talk about what you did to Valerie that caused it to rupture?
yeah, I there was this part of my brain that, I don't know if you've studied attachment styles. I would definitely say my pattern has been avoidant. Like, you have secure attached, anxious attached, and avoidant. And I was definitely an avoidant. And so avoidants tend to, out of fear, on subconscious fear, they distance a lot. And avoidants have this classic push pull pattern where when the person's right there fully available, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. But when they're a little far away, you're like, oh my God, they're the best in the world. And so I unfortunately was in one of those yo-yo points, and it was the end of the year. She had graduated, if you can imagine. So she was a senior, I was a junior, and she wanted me to come to her graduation party that her parents are putting on in Manhattan. And if you can imagine, any normal, awake young man would go, "Oh my God, I'm going to prioritize this."
Right. Right.
And I know, and like I look back and I'm like, what? It was like a alien took over me, you know. And I made it. I remember at the time I thought, oh God, I'm going to hang out with my crew friends up at Williams. I'm not going.
That
I
sounds
mean, it's like
that sounds like
I was
like a
like
20-year-old guy or a
a
21-year-old guy.
20-year-old moronic guy, and I own it. Like, but I'm like, what? How on earth did I? How could I do that, right? And so she couldn't forgive me for that. I don't blame her. I tried to win her back. By the way, there's a beautiful epilogue, which is another great story in itself. That summer, she moved out. My parents were still lived in San Mateo in the peninsula. I had landed a job, an internship representing the youngest assembly member in the California State Assembly, a Democrat from the peninsula. And so I for the summer I had a 3 months, roughly 3 months, in Sacramento, interning in this guy's office. But my ex, then moved to San Francisco, and so every weekend I'd drive from Sacramento back to the city to try to win her back. And she broke my heart. Like it was a hopeless. After a month of these like tragic heroic efforts, I was just a mess. And the secretary in the legislator's office that I worked for was like, "Oh, sweetheart, you have to stop doing this. I'm going to set you up with with a far better woman." So the secretary set me up with this. I was like, it's like this is like jumping movies here, but what's the one? Oh, The Graduate. This is like my own version of The Graduate. She sets me up with this super hot Latino secretary in the Capitol who was like 10 years my senior and like completely different world.
Right.
And that led to all kinds of crazy shit. But like I was pretty heartbroken even then, the whole summer. And I never won her back. Never won her back.
No, and do you still think about it sometimes? Like I know it doesn't like run your life, but you still think about that
Oh
one?
yeah, of course. Yeah, because she's special. Yeah, she's a special one. I think she was really cool. I think we both had an appreciation for the other. I think we probably saw each other for that age pretty well.
And have you been in touch at all after that, or was it?
No, I made a couple attempts. I haven't recently. That's because I have my hands full with my own relationship and other things now. But no, and we've never reconnected, and I would love to at some point. I'd be so curious to hear her perspective on everything.
Yeah, like what was she thinking at the time? Like how could you
Yeah,
how could you skip my party?
yeah,
You know,
I know, and it was. I hope she felt some compassion because I really tried.
you did. You put in the
I
miles,
did, but I also think she was probably understandably suspicious.
right?
As in, how reliable is this? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do that internship. You then what? Go back to Williams and finish your senior
Go
year.
back, finish my senior year, which was my hardest year. So I had the opposite. My freshman year was my best, and my senior was probably my most challenging. Partly because I overcommitted and did this giant senior thesis with original research. None of this I had to do, by the way. This was me, the overachiever, like. And so I kind of had this monkey on my back, which was this massive thesis that was just crushing me. And I was trying to also row crew, and it was a lot. Toward the end of my senior year, I realized everyone was lining up at the time for investment banks or going to DC to work in a policy think tank. And the idealist in me was like, I want to do Peace Corps. I want to, because I'd never lived abroad. I never studied abroad. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to live, I want to get out of the country. I want to go far away, and I want to be totally immersed 100% in a different culture. And I was just like, I know, side note, the Peace Corps is a bizarre organ. I'm a fan, but it's not a particularly efficient or maybe even rational organization. Like it's a great organization, but little did I know, I studied Russian in college. So I was like, this is right after the wall fell. Right. And I was like, I want to go to one of the former Eastern Bloc countries. And because I spoke reasonable Russian at the time and all, like actually Ukraine was in the top of my list. but the Peace Corps decided, no, no, we're not sending you to Russian-speaking country. We're going to send you to uh, French-speaking West Africa. And so I got an assignment out of the blue, like at the end of August. And I had French in high school, but it was never, from my perspective, particularly great. But I did have it for about 3 years. And so then I at that point it was, the way Peace Corps works, it's not like they give you a menu and go, here, pick from 5 countries. The way, if you don't know how it works, they basically say you've been selected, nominated for this country starting at this time with this area, right? And I was like, what is Niger? I hadn't even really honestly processed. I, of course, knew about Nigeria, but everyone forgets there's a country called Niger, which is like due north. And I did some reading and I was like, this place is phenomenal. It was like totally off the map, man. It's if you're using that old terminology, is fourth world. It's not even third world. It's like one of the least developed countries on the planet. Some of the highest poverty and the lowest literacy of pretty much any country. The only one that comes close is maybe Mauritania at the time, and parts of Mali, and maybe parts of, not even Sudan, like maybe parts of Chad. Like it's like, but I got totally captivated because I'm like, nobody goes here. Like nobody, no, it's so remote and it's filled with these amazing ethnic groups that like nomads. I don't know if there's a whole book called Nomads of Niger, like the Tuareg, which are those dudes that wear those big, beautiful blue turbans. And they used to be the big, what are those called? Across the Sahara, they would lead the trading caravans. Niger is full of Tuaregs, and Fulani are another amazing group that is seasonal. They move cattle, and then so I was like, I have some French, and I'm going to learn a local language, and so I said, let's do Peace Corps, and it was like a complete and utter from like rarefied, privileged New England college to desolate Sahara desert. It was like I couldn't pick. Like it was like it was radical, like a radical change,
Yeah,
man.
your head must have been spinning.
My head was spinning in good and bad ways.
And
Like
where do they put you up? Like the Peace Corps, like they've got some kind of, they have to put you up somewhere where there's like
yeah, yeah. So it's really
facilities.
cool. It may have changed, but the way it works, I think it still works this way. Um, uh, they do. First of all, you go through this selection process, which is kind of arbitrary, but then you go to a in country, like in the United States, pre-depart. They do a bunch of interviews and stuff, and then you have 3 days. In this case, we were in Chicago, where they're trying to like really shake the cage and go, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, so they're, it's kind of like full disclosure, like these are all the tropical diseases, like these are all the things, like where they're trying to really make sure that you're okay with this thing that you're about to do. And so you do that, and then when you go to the country, they, most of the countries, then I think this is still the case, they have what's called a Peace Corps training center, and it's, you do 3 months of intensive in-country training. So they don't just, to be clear, they don't just, you don't arrive in the country and they throw you into a village. They thankfully do this really rigorous, by the way, full language immersion. So you land. It was so cool, dude. I just have these vivid memories of landing. Well, it's a long story, but our flight even to Niger got detoured because of Paris. There was a big strike in Paris. Fancy that. So instead of flying Chicago, Paris, Niamey, which is the capital of Niger, we had to go do this whole side thing. We got stuck in Abidjan, the capital of Cote d'Ivoire, and ended up in Niger. And I'll never forget, we landed in the middle of the night, and in the Peace Corps, the local Nigerian Peace Corps staff come and met and greeted us at the airport. The airport, by the way, dude, is like half the lights don't work. It's like whoa, you get off on the tarmac. There's no, just to be clear, there's no like, there's no big connecting, like like we have in the United States. It's like, it's kind of like borderline. You're like, is this airport even functioning? And then you get out and there's this pungent smell, and I realize it's the smell of garbage burning. And then you like go out and this mass of human beings, and they take us in these vans, and we're going through the streets of Niamey, and I'm like, it's just total sensory overload, man. It's like, but in the best way, like the smells, and like it's hot. It's like it's the Sahara, man. It's like, and it's night, and you hear all these noises and languages, and like and they take you to this little town outside of the capital, and that's where the training center is. But all the Nigerian staff, they're all speaking in French strictly. There's no more English.
So you
So
must have
you're
learned you
like,
must have learned French while you were there.
yeah, and then but then a month after that, they then assign your area you're going to go to in the country, and as you may know, all these African countries have unbelievable language diversity. So Niger, which is not even that diverse, has 8 different language groups. 8,
Wow.
totally distinct.
Wow.
So I got assigned to the Hausa speaking area. And so then my immersion went from being French to being Hausa.
Do you speak Hausa?
Yeah, Inimagana Hausa.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, not dedi, I forgot. I mean, it's there. I don't use it, obviously.
Right,
Like,
right. You don't have many
I use
opportunities.
French. Yeah, my French is still alive, but anyway, so that was amazing, dude. And then you go through a process, and they eventually uh, you get to select, like, do I want to be super remote, or do I want to be closer to a capital, to one of the regional capitals? And of course, me being me, I'm like, I want like hardship, remote, like. So where I was, there wasn't even there wasn't even a road. There was no road. There was no electricity. There was no running water.
For how
I
many
was
years? For 2 years?
for 2 years, man.
And what are you
For two
living in?
years, I lived in a mud hut. I slept outside mostly on a straw, like on a wooden bed, like a raised bed. But I had a foam mattress and a mosquito net because it was so hot. You never wanted to be inside, right? And I lived in an amazing 500-person village with no, I mean, this place, people went to bed when the sun went down because they had kerosene lanterns and fires.
Wow.
And there was no, there were a handful of radios, but these were one way. I want to be clear. These are one way. These are radios just to listen to, AM or FM, you know, and what's crazy, you think about how we're so obsessed with safety now, and like, like, to be clear, I had no walkie-talkie. I was the sole volunteer and the sole stranger in my village. So I'm like this little white dude in a sea of black people. And like, and most of these people had never been beyond 50 kilometers outside the village.
Oh my God. And you obviously didn't have a cell phone at that time. Like that was pre-cell phone, right?
Thank God. I mean, by the way, I'm so glad that wasn't. I feel blessed because, like, you talk about it, you want real immersion. I couldn't like turn to this, and be like, oh my God, like, and so it's a blessing though. I mean, even though it was hard, it was like unbelievable, right? Because the only way, there were 2 ways for me to get out of there. One was there was our team, which was a regional team, had a 4-wheel drive Toyota, one of those old, like, cool Land Cruiser type things, and they would come and check on the volunteers like every 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
And then the only other way was I would have to walk, man. I'd have to get a donkey cart, or I'd have to walk. And there was a volunteer posted about 5 kilometers away in another village. So if I really was freaking out, I could like try to find her. In this case, it was a woman who was a public health volunteer. But
Were you ever really freaking out or no?
oh God, oh my God, like I got, as you may know, if you heard about West Africa Peace Corps stories, you can't live that way and not get most of the diseases. Like, so I had malaria twice, dengue fever, schistosomiasis, which is a parasite, amoebic dysentery, and giardia. I have all of
Oh my
those.
God. This sounds like hell.
It is, and it was awesome. No, the flip side, man, is it was like the most unbelievable, vibrant, real, like, intense thing you could possibly ask for. Period. Unmediated by anything. No mobile phone, internet, BS. Like, total experience, right? Like, no escape. No escape.
You had
I
to
mean, I
you
could
had to
read.
do
I
it.
could read.
Yeah,
I would
okay.
read. Like, that was my thing. I would read voraciously to help me kind of like.
Did you
But
bring books? You must have brought.
yes, oh my God. And then the Peace Corps volunteers would swap books. So you'd go into the hostel, which was in the regional capital, and you'd be like, I want to borrow that book. Or, yeah, like, I read some really great stuff when I was there. But like, yeah, but it's crazy because the gift of that is that you really, really have to be there.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
The-
and so you show up, you're the only volunteer in that 500-person village. You're living in a mud hut and sleeping outside. Like, what does the landscape look like?
it's I came to like it, but it's in the area they call the Sahel. So if you ever want to Google, it's actually
How
fascinating.
do you spell it?
The Sahel, Sahel.
Okay.
And it's a band, it's a climatic zone that is between the savannah to the south and the Sahara to the north. So think of it as the transition between the more wooded, more, the more wooded savanna that you've probably seen in safari brochures, and then just the complete desolation of the Sahara. The Sahara is unbelievable. It's vast, no trees, sand dunes and rock formations, like, and then of course occasionally oases, which is super cool. But like the Sahel is kind of a very arid. I guess the equivalent would be if you've been to the American Southwest, it might be like the high desert in the Southwest. It different. There's no cactuses in Niger. There's a lot of acacia trees, which are these really awesome, like very drought resistant trees. Like scraggly trees and shrubs. But it has a limited, like a 3 month rainy season, and the rest of the year it's dry, like totally dry.
And what did the Peace Corps have you doing there?
I was part of an agroforestry team, so a combination of agriculture and forestry. And I ended up focusing on three things. One, which was two of which were agroforestry related, and one which became a passion of mine, which was microcredit. So helping start micro lending for a small business. So the the one thing I did was I trained. It took forever to do this, by the way, but I helped farmers learn how to germinate native trees, which is that they didn't have a tradition of actually having to germinate and grow native trees on their own. They always just took the trees for granted, right? Unfortunately, many of them had been cut down. So I led these reforestation efforts. But what we were doing is we were forming hedgerows. If you know what hedgerows are, they're all over England and France. But basically replanting trees, but doing them along the borders of agricultural fields, so that they could reestablish habitat and provide wind and water erosion protection. And it has a radical positive effect on crop yields. And so I ran trainings and workshops for farmers on how to do these hedgerows.
Yeah, well, who taught you how to do that?
I learned from the Peace Corps and trial and error.
Wow. So you learn, like, during that
Yeah.
training period, they're giving you that.
Correct. And then you could go back to the training center during your service, the 2 years, to get extra special. Like you could say, I want to learn more about this particular thing, like beekeeping, for example. Like I didn't do that, but you could go back and go deep on beekeeping. Or so you would go to that training center and they'd have like a week workshop. Like this is how you do native tree germination, blah 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 blah. And so you could get like a little module, and then you could go back out to your village and then you try to implement it.
You know,
Yeah, it's really.
what I'm thinking is that you're just a very well-educated human being. You had a great education. Some of it was difficult, but I'm sure you see it that way. Like looking back on like all the moving you did in your
I love it,
childhood.
man. I love it. No, I don't. I mean, all that the unfortunate stuff is real, and it has had an impact, around my family. There's no question. But man, I always say, if there's anything, I have not had a boring ride. No way, no way. I've had some losses and some setbacks, absolutely, but it has not been boring.
Right. Right.
Like no way.
Yeah. Well, okay, so
Like
you get back from the Peace Corps, and
I'm totally disoriented. I'm like, what the hell? By the way, during that time, this is also kind of cool because I know this wasn't intentional; it just happened this way. During that time, I never came back to the United States. So I was gone for 2.5 years straight.
wow, that's good
Like
though. That's so
I
cool.
know, dude. No, I had no. It wasn't like my plan. I wasn't like I want to. I'm never gonna come. But it was totally inconvenient. It was my parents. By the way, my parents got divorced while I was gone. So that all that was happening. I was in this remote village. I get this. I forgot to share this detail, but it's like insane. We had, guess how many calls back to the United States a year?
2,
Three.
3.
We had three calls, and they were on a rotary phone, dude, like with those chunky ones,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like and they were scheduled, and you had to go to the capital city to go to the Peace Corps bureau. It was like, wow. I mean, it's inconceivable now. Like, and then there was an operator who would connect you into the call in the United States. Anyway, I just have to share that because it's like another era. Like
Totally.
people don't.
Not that,
It's so
but not
cool.
that long ago, but totally
No,
different.
it's a shocking, right? But so I get back. I first, this is worth saying because it's kind of crazy. I had met this unbelievable East German artist when, when I was one of my trips during Peace Corps, because you could get, they did give you time off, but you would travel with other volunteers in West Africa, which was like amazing because as a volunteer at that point, your standards were so low that you could sleep on the side of the road, be in a bush taxi that would be like, stopped at some like random checkpoint and you'd be like held up and put in a cell. And then, like, I mean, it was like traveling in another world, man. And I met this woman. I won't go into how long it happened, but I met her on a beach in Benin, the tiny country of Benin. Uh, and I'd left the people I was traveling with because of some crazy stuff they were doing. And I
What do
totally
you mean?
felt
What do you mean crazy stuff they were doing?
bad stuff. They were taking drugs in Togo, which is a dictatorship, and they were not only risking themselves and being imprisoned, but they were, in my opinion, at the time, totally dishonorable. Like this, we were Peace Corps volunteers, and they were taking their time off to do drugs in a developing country that was desperately poor. And for me at that time, my moral code, that was just like, and I left these guys, and I went back to Benin like by myself, and went to this amazing dilapidated French beach resort that was like from another era. And then, who, of course, as fate would have it, there was like this beautiful, mysterious woman on the beach. And I started trying to speak to her. I assumed she was French, it's the classic because she looked French. And she's like, I do not speak French, I speak a little English. And it turns out she's like an East Berliner
Wow.
who is this incredible artist who is traveling on her own with her friend from East Berlin around West Africa. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
I know, like, what? And she's this amazing woman who lives in Friedrichshain, which is on the east side, right?
What was
And
this after the wall had fallen?
the wall had fallen, so that's
Yeah.
why. But not that long ago. Like
Right.
this is all like, and so we start to correspond. The only way you correspond was letters, okay? And get this, I'd write her these handwritten notes and send them in par avion, like in the thin, like those like cool,
Yeah.
envelopes with all the stamps. The African countries have all these crazy stamps. And then I'd get letters from her from Berlin, and they'd be like written on a typewriter, but like an old typewriter. So they were, and her English was not great. So the the letters were like haiku. You have no idea. Like I'm a romantic. It was like the most romantic thing you could imagine, right?
Wow.
And so when I got out of Peace Corps, the first thing I did is I tried to go be with her in Berlin. So I didn't even go home. I went to Berlin in the winter in January of '96.
And
And it was a disaster because I got there. She knew I was going to come, but I came early, and she was still in a relationship, and she was trying to get out of it, but it wasn't over yet. And so I show up, and it was just a debacle.
Who's this guy?
He was at the time he felt like ancient, which is ironic because now my partner, my girlfriend, is 12 years younger than me. But this guy was about 12 years older than her. And I thought, oh my God, what's she doing? But he owned a club. He was like this super cool German dude who owned this club in the newly emerging East Berlin scene. But he was not, anyway, he found out that we had this thing, and there was like this huge conflagration and like all this stuff. And I was heartbroken, and I decided to leave. And
How
it
long were
all,
you,
by
how
the
long were you there?
I was only there for 2 weeks.
And then you're
The
just
whole
like,
thing blew up. And by the way, just to add a little more drama, because I do like drama. Do you like opera at all, or do you know opera
no,
much?
not really.
Okay. Well, if you get a chance to, you should check this out on Spotify. There's an opera called Carmina Burana, which is by a German composer, Karl Orff, and it's you might know it because it was used on the original Shogun, the Arnold Schwarzenegger Shogun movies. It's like this super intense, like German opera, and just at the beautiful poetic end of that disaster is she had bought us tickets to go to that opera and so we went to the Berlin Opera House, which is this amazing modernist thing, and saw Carmina Burana, and then I left the next day
So
to go.
tragic.
I know it was like totally like just in like, and if you can imagine, it's in Berlin too, so it's just like this oppressive like winter, and I was just I was a mess. So ended up going back to New York first, and I just was a fish out of water,
I bet.
and then ended up back in San Francisco in March of 1996, and came back to this world where my parents had sold our house. My mother was living in her own place, my dad in his own, and I was just like, I was totally disoriented.
I bet. I mean, it
It
would have
took
been
me,
disorienting anyway, but now that your family, like the parents had split, there's two different homes.
yeah,
So like what do you do? And like I want to make sure we get to like a conversation about the healing part. Like you mentioned it briefly earlier. That's fascinating to me that you've done a lot of work in that way, like with plant medicine and stuff.
a lot of work. Yeah.
Like, did that happen recently, or was that something that you did in your 20s? Or
No, I was unaware of that world in my 20s completely. And I wish, honestly, I'd known about it sooner. But everything happens in its own time. Like, I only really discovered the plant medicine about 10 years ago. It's been about 10 years in that serious work I've done with that. Of course, I was lucky enough, just to quickly accelerate the conversation. I land back San Francisco. I mistakenly think it's going to be a good idea to live with my older brother. We're like oil and water, but I'm obviously somewhat sentimental. So my brother and I got an apartment in the Lower Haight, which is a kind of was back then a somewhat edgy neighborhood, and and I worked at a terrible nonprofit. The case study of dysfunctional nonprofit, but it had a social justice kind of thing, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be great. And I learned very quickly that just because you're a nonprofit doesn't make you great. But I also bartended, so I had this kind of cool bohemian thing happening where I was bartending at this very hip. It was actually it used to be a barbecue joint that turned into this really cool mixed club crowd thing that but why am I? Where was I going to the healing? And then I applied to a million graduate schools. I was like, I gotta get serious now, right? And applied to architecture, planning, and law all at the same time because I couldn't make up my mind. And then I decided I got into a wonderful range of institutions. And the first choice was, do I go back east or do I stay west? And because I'd gotten into the Kennedy, Harvard's GSD. They have a graduate school of design, and also gotten into MIT. They have a urban planning program, but and also into Yale Law School. So I literally had like the choice,
you had like the smorgasbord of awesome choices, right?
and I was like, I don't know, man. And so Berkeley was one of I applied to graduate planning program at Berkeley because I'm really interested in urban growth and planning. So I took that, and so I just wanted to say that was another key moment. But I bring all this up, which is up to that point I was quite serious. I looked at drugs as kind of generally bad things. You probably want to stay away from those, and I had some minor curiosity in college, but it was never. And um, and so I plunged into grad school, and at some point, late 20s, all of the unprocessed family stuff, along with the pressure of being in grad school, kind of came crashing down on me. And I was finding myself with panic attacks and feeling incredibly anxious and lost. And so I started a journey of therapy, which for me, up until that point, I thought that was an admission that like that I was like broken, or I had a lot of that old school view of it. I didn't understand it as actually a form of healing. I saw it as something you do if you're really fucked up, like,
Sure.
and by the way, sadly, side note, I got referred to the worst possible therapist. My first therapeutic relationship, in retrospect, was really not very good. But I bring that up, which is to say that was kind of the first moment when I was like, oh, there's work to be done, inside,
Right.
inside.
Right.
And then the next thing I know, I reapplied my first semester in planning school because like this stuff's planning's great, but I was like, this is kind of a joke. And I reapplied to law schools. So I applied to Berkeley, which has a great program, in Stanford, got into both, and then was like, I looked at Stanford's ticket price, and I was like, even then, man, it was like 65,000 a year, and I'm like, which of course now it's like what, it's even more. And I was like, I actually had met some amazing people in my graduate program at Berkeley, and I was like, no, no, no. So I did a joint degree. I actually did a law degree and a planning degree combined at Berkeley. And so I did 4 years combined because instead of the law degree is 3, you probably know, and the planning is 2. And so I packed them into a 4-year module. So while all that was going on, one of my dear high school friends, who's an amazing bon vivant and like adventurer, was like, Michael, you need to go out and dance and take drugs with me. She's like, you're like way too serious. Like you're like stressing
I
out.
was
And
going
I
to
was
say you
like,
have like your shit so together at this point. I kind of felt
sort of,
like when you were
man.
talking earlier, I was like when you were talking about those guys in Africa who went out raving, like the Peace Corps guys. Like in my head, I was going, okay, if I had been in the Peace Corps in Africa at that time in my life, would I have been raving? I don't know. I can't say.
Well, can I just say it's so I love that you say that, first of all, because that younger self was so regimented. I was so almost I was like a secular missionary. So I wasn't religious, but I was like, there is a right way to do things, and we must, I had this real kind of almost and by the way, this is the beautiful side, like super idealistic, Kennedy-esque, like those who've been given a lot need to give a lot. Like, this is my time. I had this incredible privileged undergraduate degree. Like, I need to be out here. These people are it's true. The Nigerians are so materially poor. It's shocking. I mean, there's like in my village, there's massive child nutrition, people like unbelievable amounts of physical suffering, like crazy. So you have to understand, like, there was like this kind of like, I still, by the way, it didn't stop me from when I get into the capital from going out and partying with alcohol with my friends. But the idea of doing drugs felt like, one, in these countries, it's super. There's not a lot of it. But number two, it's super dangerous. And three, it just felt like, what would I contributing to a drug market in a country that can barely even, its schools can barely even function.
Yeah.
It felt. You understand? For me, it felt like the peak of indulgence. But that kind of what you're picking up on, there was like this very like, there's a right way to do things. And by the way, I love this young man because he was like fierce. Like, I was like a fucking maniac, man. I was so zealous. And it wasn't like, that's what I said, a secular missionary. It was like I had that kind of fervor. Like, I have 2 years, I got to contribute, right? And so I kind of carried a lot of that intensity, type A. And there I was in graduate school, and I needed more release. And so this dear friend, who's still a friend, she's been a friend since ninth grade, and she was totally like completely connected to Burning Man and like all the electronic music scene, and she's a
Everybody
food
needs that.
writer.
Everybody needs that friend.
Dude, she's a food writer. She's
Uh-huh.
like, she has this giant like gay posse. Like, she had like this like entourage that she'd go with everywhere. I was like, I loved her, man. And so she kind of got me. She gave me my first ecstasy, which for me was like it was like revelatory. I was like, oh my, it was like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I slowly started to realize that there was a group of accomplished professionals who could actually go out and use these. First of all, I hadn't adopted the word medicine yet, but I want to share with you the definitional term for me is a drug is a substance used to escape. Medicine is a substance used to heal and grow.
Right.
And you can use the same substance in either way. Some substances are better suited to the heal and grow. Like, I would argue it's you do not party on ayahuasca. If you I don't know if you've had it, but you don't. You don't do that.
Yeah.
It's just not.
I
But
haven't I
like,
haven't done that one. I
oh,
want
okay,
to. I want
okay,
to, but I
yeah.
haven't.
To me, it's the most extraordinary. But you may have done psilocybin or mushrooms, and like you can do party version, or you can do a profound sacred version, and it's there, and it's the context and the people you're around and how you receive the sacrament. But the first stage for me was to be able to have fun and to be able to go, wow, there are responsible adults who have real jobs that are actually going out and having an incredible time dancing and connecting in this altered state that's beautiful, right? That's playful and fun, and so for me and my dad, that was that regimented intensity was my dad,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was my way to help break out of that suffering, right? That just that prison of like, you got to be good, you got to work, work hard, work hard, work hard, and so for me, that was the first time that drugs, they were helping me realize there's another way to be. And then jumping forward, she that was my friend, and then I soon after I graduated, I got this amazing, like a dream job at one of the best law firms in San Francisco. I with this working for this incredible partner who's still a friend today, who's just like amazing woman mentor. But I'm working at the fancy law firm. This is when we all wore suits. So I'm wearing suits. I'm going downtown. I have a secretary. Like, but then on the weekends, man, I'm going to these incredible raves. Like, it's like this is incredible. Like, I could do it both.
Yeah, yeah.
I could do it both. But I did that, and then I went to Burning Man, and I was like,
What
oh
year?
my, my first year at Burning Man was 2002.
I went in 99.
Oh
I
wow,
convinced,
wow.
I convinced I had heard about it from a friend of mine, and then I was working for this film company, and I somehow finagled my boss. I was like, I can go film like some documentary footage at this thing in the desert, and I think
Oh dude.
he sent me, so I got to bring friends because he didn't want to
Oh
pay a
my
crew.
god.
So yeah,
That's incredible. Well, you got there. I mean that early. I mean, by the way, I've enjoyed all the stages of Burning Man. I'm not one of those Burning Man snobs. I've been 16 times, by the way. Full disclosure. Like,
wow, wow,
yeah, like I've done the whole thing. Like I've been deep into it. Now I less so now, but I what you can probably appreciate is those earlier years. It was so much more raw and kind of untamed,
yeah. I mean,
and
it was
it's
also
still
like I want to say there were 25,000 people there the year that I went, or 15,000. I forget, something like that. But now it's like almost 100,000 people. I think, right?
80. I think it peaked at like 80 something, but
Okay.
like, yeah, I mean, enormous. And by the way, it's declining now. It's interesting. I think it may have reached, I think we've done peak Burning Man. I think it's going to settle back down to something around 40 or 50,000. But anyway, I've appreciated, I don't have, there's actually all these different benefits to the different stages. I have a broad sample size, so I feel like I can actually speak to this. It's
Sure.
like, but anyway, then I was going to say that's Burning Man was like the next moment of like, whoa, wait a second, there is a whole nother thing going on out here, and I love dancing like passionately, and that was when dancing and substances, I started realizing not only is this fun, there's something like profoundly healing going on. Like and I almost would get into these kind of I would get into these profound spiritual states. And it was so nice because a friend of mine who's a burner noticed and was like, she's like, you need to go sit with Madrecita, with Mother Ayahuasca. She's like, she's like, I see you out there. Like you're like, you need more than this. She's like, this is awesome, but you need to go sit in ritual. I was like, oh, and that was the first time. And I didn't get a chance to do that until 2000. Well, I guess it's been about 11 years. 2014, I think, was the first time I sat down with the medicine.
And
It was extraordinary. It blew my fucking mind. I was very lucky too, by the way, because people's first experience can sometimes be especially rough. Because you may know, it's an extremely powerful hallucinogen, but it's not just that, it's a purgative. People don't, I think they don't appreciate this. It's not just hallucinating. For a lot of people, it promotes a lot of purging. And the purging is, of course, both physical purging, like vomiting,
Uh-huh.
but it's also a lot of profound emotional and psychological and spiritual purging. And that can show up for some people like really intensely, you know. But I was blessed. I got I landed with a group that turned out to be of the most impeccable ethical standards, because they're these, you know, when you're doing this work, you're very vulnerable. You know, it's a super profound, sensitive place to be. The veil between this world and the spiritual world is so thin, um, and the dividing lines between you and other people are really thin. It's very permeable, and so you need a really experienced facilitator shaman to help
And this was in the Bay.
protect
You
that.
found a shaman in the Bay Area? Because that's my thing about it is that I'm like, I want to do ayahuasca, but it's like, who's this
You
person in Malibu?
no, you need to be extremely selective.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say to people, and I've referred a bunch of people, and I've several of my friends now have sat with my community, and you know, to me, it is the container is everything. Like it's like, and it breaks my heart that some people might be sitting with people who are not skilled or ethical.
Yeah.
And it's like, anyway, I got lucky, but this friend was a wise person, and I landed in this amazing community. And they practice. The woman who facilitates it is from the North Bay, but she has trained for years under like the really good American facilitators are all of them. Everyone is training in a lineage, because this is an ancient practice, right? It's a gift. It's a, you know, as they say, it's a technology. It's a spiritual technology that has been developed in the Amazon by these extraordinary teachers and passed on. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure the person you're with is studied in a lineage and that they respect that lineage. And the lineage, by the way, is everything. It's the, you may know this, but the medicine, the psychedelics, and the purgative are part of it, but they're not like the magic is that the medicine is paired with singing, and these songs are sacred songs. And the songs are called Icaros. You may have heard they're healing songs.
And
Yeah.
then there's the
And
tobacco and everything. They blow in
oh,
smoke.
and then there's different plants. Yeah, different traditions bring them in different ways. I'm a huge fan of Grandfather tobacco. I find him like he like helps me. It helps. Grandfather is the tobacco is a masculine spirit. The Madrecita ayahuasca is a feminine spirit. You start to learn in this place that there are different. The plants have their own. I know this sounds a little woo woo, man, but I'm just telling you, it's like they have their own presence,
Their own intelligence.
their own intelligence, and they have their own agenda. I
So
know that sounds like a,
no,
but
no,
it's I've experienced it. It's real.
no, sure. I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
And I think like I've heard from people who have done ayahuasca specifically that there's like, there's like that feminine presence and you see like people will actually have some sort of interaction with
oh yeah,
a feminine presence when you're inside
yeah,
of like an ayahuasca journey.
yeah. And she can be like the punishing grandmother, or she can be the divine seductress. It's she just, you know, she'll show up in ways sometimes you don't know. There are times when she doesn't show up at all or barely, and you're just like, oh my god, where are you? Or times if she comes at you like a bulldozer, man.
You can see her?
And
Like is
but
it you can see like an actual like
I'm speaking like broadly experientially. Like
right.
I've had both visiones, you know, and then the bigger ones are the deep, they're quieter, like they're not the, like, by the way, the visions are cool, but as a lot of the advanced people will tell you, they're almost a distraction, and they're not bad. This is like beautiful. By the way, some of them can be like amazing. Like I've had like crazy visions, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and what they say is that's her way of distracting you while she does the real work. Like she's like in there, like working on that emotional block or going right in for, because she can work on physical ailments too. It's not just spiritual or psychological blockages. She can like get in there. And so that it's funny, there's all kinds of theories on like what those images mean and everything. But I found that, so the long story was that I started, Burning Man was like my gateway. And I'm committed. I do pretty regular, I usually see, I have a phenomenal therapist. So I have a more traditional therapist who's plant medicine positive and is a traveler and has been in these realms too, and is also really like a rock star in terms of, I would, somatic therapy, and she's very up to speed on attachment issues, which matters a lot to me. And so I work with the more traditional, and then I do the medicine work, and then I have a daily meditation, more traditional Buddhist meditation practice. So I kind of, that's the sort of realm I work in.
What's the
And
what's the like the regimen with plant medicine? Is it like a quarterly journey or like once a
I,
year or twice a year or
yeah, well, great you ask. Everyone, it's different. Like there are the people who are training to literally be a shaman, and those people will go, and it's amazing. I have one of my dear friends. He's a recovering lawyer like me. He's now full in. I mean, he's spending 6 months a year in the Amazon in Peru training. He's
wow,
like, he is literally, when he goes, he's drinking ayahuasca every other day. Just imagine that. Like, and that's what the ayahuasqueros do
to
when
learn the terrain.
when they're training to learn the terrain. So I'm just giving you, that's like an extreme. This guy is amazing, my friend. He's doing that. And then you have people who do this as a kind of once a year, or maybe every few years, as a way to help dislodge, clean, see clearer.
Yeah,
I like where I am. I've tried to do this. For me, it's part of an active spiritual practice and spiritual healing practice. So my ideal is once a quarter. That's my ideal.
yeah,
And when I do that, I usually sit 2 nights. I drink 2 nights.
back to back.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And then some of the sittings are 3 nights, and then I often will be a helper. So I really love doing service work now. So one of the things because I've traveled enough that I now kind of, I'm at a point where I can help people a little bit. To be clear, I'm just doing things like helping them hold their hand if they're scared, or maybe bringing them water. I'm more of like I'm of service. I tend the fire. We have a fire in this beautiful yurt, and like, so I'll do more of like that kind of just broad service, like bringing people towel, blankets if they're cold, helping the shaman, like if the shaman wants me to do something, like um, lift somebody up who can't get up because they're too high, right? Like to take them to the toilet, right? Like,
Right, right.
so I do the service work. I try to do some of that too.
Wow. So, and you feel like you've gotten a lot from it, like it's changed your
Oh my
life.
God, it's been so good.
Different
And
person.
I want to be clear, it doesn't solve. This is like I can tell you, because the last set of journeys I've had have been really hard, really hard, scary even. Like
Why?
I had a couple that were plain the scariest I've had. One of them. So by the way, there's different kinds of scary. Like, so the scary that I had in the beginning was like I might encounter a real sad memory. The medicine wants me to go look at something, like the way I treated somebody, or to really tap into my younger self, to feel how isolated I was as a seventh grader, like to go right there and be with that little boy. Sometimes she like takes you and was like, look, you need to look at this, right? That's, quote, scary because it hurts. It's right. It's like, then there's scary stuff too, where she's like so powerful and like there's weird creatures coming at you and you're like, what the,
Like earthly creatures or just shit?
yeah, like, or weird. Like there was a period of time where these like insect like things would come and they would like try to digest me, and I was just like, "What are you doing?" Like, like that scared me. They because they were so powerful, like these visions. I'm like, "What is happening? I'm disoriented. Like, where am I?" That's, I call that first gen scary. I had an experience, one of the scariest I ever had, where I didn't have any of that, but instead I flipped into a paranoid delusional state. I became convinced the shaman was corrupt. I was convinced that he had lost his mind and that people were trying to leave, and we were all trapped. I literally got into a dark dark story. And I got out of it, let me tell you. But let me tell you, it gave me a keen appreciation for what those poor folks who suffer from paranoid delusion, the ones we see on the street, it made me go, oh my God. Like, and I had this for maybe about an hour and a half. I was convinced the shaman was drunk.
Wow. How did you get
Like
out? It just
I
eventually.
thought, it was, I was, dude, I was 100% certain. Not, is he like okay? I was like, this is bad. He's wrong. And that man, let me tell you, that she was like showing me a shadow piece of myself. So I want to tell you, like, when you do this work, like, I don't want to scare you, but like, there are certain places that you go where you're like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
and and I thank God I'm experienced because there's breathing technique. I was able to work and then what happened was a woman came to help me, who was a sitter. That's what you call when you help with people. And she somehow broke through, like her kindness and the way she reached out to me and brought me back into the room because I left the room and I was like off in this random room in this house and like, and she brought me back and then I woke up and it was like, I woke up as in I suddenly realized, oh my God.
Right.
And then, by the way, talk about interesting. Not only did I realize that was a complete delusion, but then I got this wave of shame because I was like, how could I have thought that about our shaman? Like, like, oh my God. And I was saying things like out in the other room. I was like, okay, it's over. It's over. This whole thing's over. I was like talking like, like a crazy man. So that's what I mean. Like it can sometimes, I mean, I've traveled a lot with it. So I'm just saying, but my first journey was exquisite, exquisite, beautiful, profound.
It's interesting to hear you talk about these darker times because, everyone, you hear about the bad trips and everything, but you hear when you talk to somebody who's done a lot of this kind of work in like a medicinal context or like with that intent, they'll tell you about the really dark trips, but there's almost like there's a positive tinge to it. It's not
A
like.
hundred, 100%. So I just want to say, almost inevitably, the morning after is phenomenal. So even if that night didn't resolve in a beautiful way, there's a softness, and this is when it's like you've been clean, you've been flossed, like there's this kind of deplaquing, and I am so much more grounded, quiet, loving, gentle. And the main thing I want to convey, there's all kinds of things happening, but you know, one of the things that's happened over the last 10 years is my reactivity that, I call it the saran wrap of conditioning, that part of us that our psychology is like, so like when you might have snapped at your partner or you might have taken something personally that was totally not. I notice more and more, like I'm particularly the day after, I have this freedom, right? I'm softer. I'm less egoically bound up. And even when it's been a real humdinger, and even that, like that particular weekend, which was the scariest weekend I've ever had, it took me a couple days to see the dividend.
But you did see
That
it.
yeah, I did, and then the next time I drank, which was I was very scared because I'm like, oh my God, what if I go there again? A perfect emissary from the dark, a Russian immigrant, said, Michael, I watch you. You need to talk to me. I see you. He's like, you're afraid of darkness. Like, I love this guy. He's like, you need to be friends with darkness. When it comes, you say, hey, come inside. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly what I did. And I was like, oh, because before I was like, no, I have to trust my shaman. Have to try, can't possibly, right? And what he was inviting me to do is he said, Michael, some doubt is actually really good. And that was when I suddenly realized that's what she was teaching me, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
they're mystical, right? It's mystical. It's not always like delivered on a platter. It's not like, oh yes, thank you, ayahuasca. Like I see that I'm holding resentment towards my mother. It's not like it. Sometimes it's like this subtle healing.
so spiritually, like you've got like the plant medicine, you've got talk therapy, and you've got like what, Buddhist meditation. Is that right?
Yeah, those are my three, my primary, and then I just hike a lot in nature, which is like I think,
We sound similar.
yeah.
Like
Oh
I don't do
yeah,
I don't do talk therapy, but I do the meditation, and I mean I don't do I wish I could do more plant medicine. Like the circumstances of my life I got to get away,
You
I
got
have
to get
young
away.
kids and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, but, that's kind of like where I'm at. Like, where do you, like, when you think about like the grand scheme of things, do you have like defined thoughts as to what the hell's going on in this reality of ours?
I mean, I'll just say this. I am, it is super scary and hard for me because I care so much about the world and I love my country and I'm horrified about what's happening right now. It feels like this really dark, almost demonic possession has taken hold of a whole number of like of people that should know better, and the collapse of the Republican. By the way, I say this, and Dan Conway knows this really well. Like, I am not an ideologue. If you had to place me, I'm probably center left in the sense that I have a genuine belief that when you have a lot of abundance and wealth, it makes sense to care for those who don't have the same. And I say that broadly, and there's good ways to do that and dumb ways to do that. And I have lots of critiques. I think the identitarian, all this woke stuff has been devastating to the Democrats. I think it's wrong-headed, and I could go down a list of things that are so upsetting. But the main thing that strikes me is the nihilism, the selfishness, the pettiness. It's really alarming to me. And so when this election happened, I was heartbroken. I mean, just heartbroken. And then not just heartbroken, fearful of where things are going. But I want you to know it's interesting because leading up to the election, I sat, and then I sat after the election, just about a month ago, I drank. And, when you're traveling in that world, when you go into that other realm, things are not as you can imagine, it's not all compartmentalized, right? And I even had a moment of this felt like this Trumpian darkness showed up in my sit. Like it was there. And it was like almost trying to envelop me. And I got all these images of indulgence and like stealing and taking and this kind of like grab it while you can, right? This, there's only one truth and it's power, Nietzsche's nightmarish statement. This kind of nihilism that says there is no truth. There is no truth, right? There's just power. And so I'm deeply concerned. I try to monitor my intake and because I do believe in being informed and I do believe in reading and I want to find a way in my own way at the right time to be part of the fight to restore what I would argue is sanity. But I'm not going to abandon, and I believe that my this spiritual work is helping me. And I like to believe it's also, and if you do this work, you'll see that some of the spaces you go into, you realize you're working on things far bigger than you. And it's crazy. I've had moments where I can almost feel like I can feel the room or I'm helping someone in the room. It's almost like I'm holding this whole world. And there are moments when you're just so intimately connected where the self dissolves and you like can feel this almost like a crystalline network.
Like a molecular.
Yeah, like and I had one time where I could see these beautiful, almost like spider webs, and it was like black ink, and I could see these like gorgeous spider webs, and I had this sense of like like this kind of big empty beauty, and this sense of this connection, and I see Trump and all of this resentment and distrust as a kind of a demon that needs to be addressed, like it needs to be dealt, it needs to be experienced, and we need to move through it, we need to move it out, right? And that sounds a little out there, but for me, I want to operate both in the practical realm. Like today I gave money to the judge who's running in Wisconsin against Elon Musk's crazy right-wing candidate. So I'll do something as tactical as that. I gave $100. I'm like, just boom. And then I'm also very engaged in local politics, so not as much as I used to be. I was very engaged. I
When you were a
worked for Mayor.
lawyer?
Yeah, when I worked for Mayor Newsom in his administration when he was mayor.
And you
Um,
now are what, a housing entrepreneur?
yeah, I'm starting a company and I work as a consultant to other developers. Yeah. and on housing. And that's my passion. We need to build a ton of housing in California. I think you probably are aware of that. In the right places, right? And housing in the right places. But so I try to, I'm obviously practically engaged in the world, but that work, the spiritual work, I feel like is that I need to be, I can't not do that. Just given me.
It's foundational.
Yeah, it's as my awesome, amazing therapist says, I'm a deep diver. I just can't be. If I wanted to be, she has this beautiful metaphor. She says there's beachgoers, snorkelers, and deep divers. And she says this isn't normative. We're not. It's not like snorkelers are better people than beachgoers, and that deep divers are better people than snorkelers. It's more about a kind of temperament, and you could argue karma. And I landed in this world with a deep diver spirit. And when I deny it is when I go astray.
Meaning,
It's when I betray myself. It's when I'm not my highest self. Is when I try to suppress that or put it away. Right. So for me to not do this work would almost be like betraying myself. Like feels that way, right? Because I'm like, there's something about this work. I'm like, I want to find a way to keep this going, and it's going to change and evolve. I don't know how, but it's not going to be. It's not static. But in my own small way, I've been helping some people find the medicine. I sing now in ceremony. Um, I'm not a singer in normal life, just FYI, but I actually sing sacred songs in ceremony. So I'm finding my own little way to be a contributor in that realm. It doesn't mean that as you can tell, I'm not disengaged from the practical world. I think if anything, I'm trying to find like how do I let that how do I harvest the goodness, the lessons from that profound mystical spiritual work, and then bring it into the practical, into the mundane.
yeah, yeah. It's like that's the thing is that like we spend so much of our time, obviously, in conventional reality. But if you've had a taste of, I guess, what you would call ultimate reality, or if you have a sense that it's out there, you do want to strike some kind of balance. And it feels like we're way out of balance. We're tipped too far into the conventional, and we don't
Yeah,
have as a
we're out of.
species.
I agree with you, and I'm reading a book right now. It's phenomenal. It's called, I think, Why Liberalism Failed. It's by J.K. Deneen, not J.K. Deneen. It's Patrick Deneen. It's pretty careful. It's like whoa, but this guy's a really high, at Georgetown professor of political philosophy. I don't agree with 100% of his argument, but one of the core arguments in his book that I do agree with is that if you called me, I'd say I'm a classical liberal, which is I believe in universal rights. I believe that a way to organize society is through democratic institutions, and it's the worst, it's the best of the worst systems, right? It's
Right,
like
right.
any blah blah whatever the expression is, but like he's arguing, and I think there's a truth to this. He said the problem with liberalism is in one of the bugs in the system is that it's all about questioning anything that interferes with individual rights and individual identity. And it seems to worship that above all else. And he claims, and there's some truth to this, that in tearing down some of these, quote, conservative or communal boundaries, the saying, oh, we can't just say man and woman, we have to have 1,000 genders, right? We can't, this constant imperative to tear down things that, quote, limit freedom. We're actually destroying a deeper freedom, which is the freedom of belonging. And I've been thinking a lot about this because to me, that's part of what I get from the spiritual work. Is like I'm part of something far bigger than me, 100%, right? And I worry a lot of those crazy MAGA acolytes. Trump is offering them a false god. The god is himself, man.
100%.
As Sam Harris, who's one of my heroes, says, one of my favorite podcasters, Sam Harris, just brilliant. He's the grab him by the pussy Jesus. He's best. Like he offers complete. You're forgiven because he's more foul than you. Trump will never, he will degrade, denigrate, boast, brag, lie, but he is not sanctimonious, dude. Think about that. He's never sanctimonious. The left is sanctimonious. You're not using the right genders. You're not, like pointing, finger waving. The thing about Trump is he forgives everything if you give fealty to him.
Right.
And
That's right.
that's a dark God. That's darkness, right? And but what I think I'm getting at is that but people want belonging, and like he's offering them the kind of worst form of it, right?
And the liberal side has alienated people, is what you're saying.
And in my obviously this is 100% my perspective, but I feel like the Dems, who I'm a registered Democrat, have gotten hijacked by a tiny minority, and I'm going to go ahead and use it. I use it pejoratively of the woke virus, where everyone's divided into who's the most privileged, the least privileged, and I'm going to constantly be making these hierarchies. I'm going to make all these assumptions based on your pigment color. It's madness. It's not at all what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted. It's not liberation. It's like a new totem pole. Who is the most oppressed? Okay, they have the most moral right. Seriously, like, are you black and blind and lesbian? Okay, you're way up there. But if you come across as a privileged white straight guy, sorry, your opinions don't matter as much. And unfortunately, I'm making somewhat cartoonish summary of it, but like that is kind of the essence of what they've been selling. And people are like, fuck you. I'm like white working class and my mother was an alcoholic and I barely made it to college. You know what I'm saying? Like the individual stories, you're a storyteller, like you're a story writer. Think of how unique everyone's story is. I don't want to rush to judgment about some dude who happens to look like he's straight and white. I have no idea about his private world. I don't. What I do know is I don't want him or a black person treated any differently in terms of opportunities. I'm fierce about that, like fierce. But I'm not going to condescend to say that if there aren't so many black people in this particular profession, that means it's structurally racist. It's madness. It's madness. Like, I mean, really? Like classical music is dominated by Asians. Is it anti-white? Is classical music like why are there so many Jewish attorneys? Like, there's so many complex reasons. It has nothing to do with pigment. I mean, it's like so anyway, these are the stuff where I'm like, Dems, like wake up, because that crap is what made them so toxic that people voted for this disaster, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I think there's got to be a huge rethinking on the left of like what it's going to look like. I think that's clearly part of the message of these
Yeah.
times.
True inclusivity, brother. That means inclusivity of people who might disagree with you on certain things. Like, someone who might be uncomfortable with abortion. I'm not going to slam the door in their face. I happen to disagree. I'm a believer in abortion rights, but like, I'm going to let them into the living room and I want to hear them out and I care about them. I have some missionary friends I met in Africa who I'm so close to. I love these people, and they are quote pro-life, and we're so aligned on 90% of things. They're in my coalition, man. Like they think Trump is a maniac, and I'm like, but can you imagine if some super woke person said, "Oh my God, you're pro-life, fuck you," like we can't do that.
That's not,
You
yeah,
know?
that's not a way to build like a
Yeah.
coalition. Like you got to have a big tent if you're going to win in a democracy. Uh, I, I guess the last question that I'll ask you is, since we're on this track, is like how does this end? Do you see, like, have you gamed this out? Do you have a vision of how things get better?
Well, right now, tactically speaking, I love James Carville. I don't know if you listen to him. He's amazing.
He's my first cousin once removed.
What?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? Well, say hello.
Uh,
He is.
I don't know him very well. I've
Oh
met
my
him once,
God,
but
he's
my mother,
amazing.
he's my mom's cousin.
He's amazing. So I believe. So just a couple notes on this on facts because I love facts. Fact: Donald Trump won the White House not by a majority, by a plurality, with one of the slimmest margins in the 20th century, 1.5 percentage points. This is not 1972. 1972, McGovern,
That was a wipeout.
Nixon. 30-point spread or something, dude.
No, that's the biggest
I
electoral
mean,
college victory, I think, in
ever, right?
history.
But
Yeah.
LBJ 1964 crushed Goldwater, crushed him. Like, I think it was a 15-point spread on the vote. Obama, the most recent one, 2008, 8 points, man. Like, that's a landslide. So he is way, 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 way overestimated his support. And he is acting, as you can see, recklessly crazy. And the person who voted because the eggs are too expensive are like, what? Like, you want to invade Greenland and like you're going to defy court orders and you're like blowing up agencies, and this like crazy man, Elon Musk, who's unelected, is running around like telling people they're fired. Dude, I'm just telling you, people forget 2008, Obama had 60 Senate seats, a crushing majority in the House, a massive win. 2010, remember that? The Tea Party, 100% flipped upside down. The Republicans crushed the Dems, 60 seats they won in the House. 60. They flipped. Unbelievable. Like, so I offer that simply to say there's a short-term tactical thing, which is I think he's way overestimated. And I think the Dems have a real chance in the midterms at definitely retaking the House and putting some brakes on this train wreck. That's short term. Longer term, the Dems have to start to offer a more community, like a broader, less judgmental, less identitarian, and they need to form essentially a Patriots Alliance, a pro-democracy, pro-inclusivity, true inclusivity. And they need to say, these people are in it for themselves, and they're undermining all the things that make us unique. But they need to offer more than a critique. They need to say, we want you, you belong, you belong. And we need to be comfortable saying things that some of the super woke left doesn't like. Like, yes, every immigrant matters, but that doesn't mean every immigrant gets to come into this country. We have to have some, as the guy I'm reading says, there has to be some boundaries. And we need to start to say it's okay that we have those. And, you poor American, I want you in the Midwest, can't pay your bills. I want you to know that you are a priority first. And we'll work with Central America to try to reduce the conditions that force all these people to flee here. But you don't worry, you're never going to question if the Democratic Party wants to support you first. And these things are hard for some people to say. And, it doesn't mean I'm a jingoist. If you haven't picked up on it, I'm a world citizen, but I also not a fool. Like, no, just because you have a bad situation at home doesn't give you carte blanche to come here. And it doesn't mean I don't hate these people. I'm just like, you got to have some rules, right?
Yeah.
So that's a spiritual thing though, because it's about saying, no, this is my family here. This is my family, and my family can still help other families, but we got to take care of my family first. This is my family.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I really deeply appreciate your candor and like all of the insights that you shared, from your life. And I hope that things turn in the way that we hope they turn, speaking of this country and whatever lies ahead of us. I hope it happens sooner than later. And I just wish you well.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. It's been somewhat cathartic for me to tell you the story. So thanks for being such a good listener.
Okay, that was my conversation with Michael, age 54, a housing entrepreneur in Berkeley, California. What did I tell you? That was good, right? Totally fascinating. My thanks again to Michael for talking with me about his existence, and thank you for listening. A reminder that if you're out there and you know somebody who might be a great guest for this new character study series, you can email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com. Don't forget to subscribe to all the stuff. Subscribe to this show, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Patreon if you love me and love this show. Get a book club subscription or an Other People t-shirt over at otherppl.com. Check out Deep Dive at www.deepdive.audio. Give this show a rating and review it over at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. If you are so inclined, it would help me out a little bit and help the show in the algorithm. And what else? Coming up on Tuesday, I will be in conversation with Paul Listi. He is making his debut on the Other People Show. It feels kind of overdue. He's got a memoir out. It is called Song So Wild and Blue, A Life with the Music of Joni Mitchell. I'm very excited to have Paul Listi on this program. That one airs on Tuesday. So stay tuned.